I think we're still headed the wrong direction right now. And I can't see how we can stop the inflation that we've got going on. We've got interest rates that are going up dramatically, but we're still seeing lots of governments that are offering incentives to their people to try to help compensate for this. I don't see any way that we're going to really recover the price of oil and get that down. So some of the real basics in our lives are just, they're still kind of out of control. And until we can get our arms around that, I just don't see how it can be a lot better. Could we get to where we're kind of getting flatter? Yeah, probably. But as far as getting really better, I have a hard time seeing that right now.
Yeah, I hear you, David. I have a lot of sympathy from your point of view. I mean, look, some of the strategists will point out that there was a mighty old rally after that big decline back in 1970. The other thing I will say, which makes me slightly less curmudgeonly than I normally am, is the fact that realisation that valuations are slightly more realistic. Now, I know that's only based on the premise that earnings will be as advertised at the moment. And if we do see a lot of earnings revisions and margin problems going forward, then, of course, the PE that we have now isn't actually accurate. So are valuations more accurate? Are they more enticing? Or, again, just a little bit of caution there?
I think that they're a lot more enticing than they were a few months ago, obviously. But I'm still holding off right now. I'm not putting all my eggs back in the markets right now, because I think that we've still got a ways to go. I think there's going to be some additional retracements that we're going to have in the marketplace, and I think that is probably necessary. When you have interest rates doing what they are, it's really hard to keep things stable and just working and going one direction. We've got to have you've been in the markets as long as I have, and I'm sure, and there's always rebounds, there's always corrections, and then that's always followed up by times of plenty. And we've had a lot of plenty over the last few years, and it's time. It's not surprising to see a correction happening like this.
Dave, we've been talking a lot about dynamic investing, dynamic strategies for years now, but very relevant over the first half of the year, just how quickly investors had to change tact from a pace of rate increases to rapid increases, and now the situation perhaps with stagflation or even a recession. It feels like there are more twists and turns ahead. And if I can just take you to the sectors then, because it feels that investors have been trying to position on markets by taking bets off, but also rotating by sectors. And if you look at the slump we saw in FANG plus stocks to the tune of 43+% versus about 20% stripped off the banks, what do you think rotation will look like in the second half of this year based on these twists and turns we still have ahead?
Well, we have seen a lot of the tech stocks come off. And, you talked about the FANG stocks, and that's something those are the ones that we've seen the biggest gains in. The stocks that seem to be best, in my opinion, are stocks in commodities and, the things that people need to have every day, the necessities, the, healthcare, anything to do with, food and, clothing and things like that. Housing, I'm not quite sure on that one. That one's kind of up in the air, because with the way interest rates are going, that's a long-term big investment. So even though that is a kind of a stable thing, I think that we're going to see some, a little bit of withdrawal in the housing market. I think you have to with the way interest rates are going, because prices are just going way up. But I would stick with more staples.
And Dave, can I ask you about the data? I mean, we had the PCE yesterday, the inflation numbers, not as hot as the numbers could have been. But that said, it doesn't really seem as though the data is reinforcing some expectations out there that inflation has peaked yet.
I don't think it has. I think it is still going on, and even with the severe interest rate increases that we've seen, you've just got to think. You think about the main things that people are consuming. I mean, the price of gas and oil go into so many things that we consume, not just the fuel we put onto our cars. It's heating, it's the containers that we use, it's everything that we have in our lives. And until there is some type of a resolution with what's going on in Russia right now in the war in Ukraine, or there is time for the oil companies to be able to ramp up their production, which does not happen overnight. That's going to be a 6-month, at a minimum, process. And then you've got to really wonder how willing they are going to be to really jump in with both feet to ramp up production when we might have an end of the Ukraine war, and then the whole Russian supply is back in the marketplace, and then we've got an oversupply of oil, and the prices drop through the floor. So I think there's some caution in the oil industry, and they are, which is I think justified. But until we get that under control, I don't see that inflation can stop.